Our own DPX's on John Romano. You might have seen John on 2020 or in films such as Bigger, Faster, Stronger. He has a background, and I'm sure you've read some of his work in muscles, yes. And magazines such as Muscular Development, Fitness RX, Muscle Mag International. He covered issues surrounding the use of legal and illegal performance-enhancing substances, and that's what his background's in. He also has had positions where he gives, his opinion to the media, and he's kind of been outspoken in this controversial topic. So let's everybody welcome John Romano. The title of his talk is "The Uncomfortable Truth About Drugs, Supplements, and Liberty."
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I know this is the last presentation of the afternoon, so I'll probably get you to get out of here. So I'll make it quick. Dr. Antonio asked me when I prepared this that he wanted a PowerPoint presentation to go along with it, and that totally screwed me up because I just usually talk. And so now he said all the people at ISSN like pictures. So I figured all the textbooks you guys read, you might really want to have some pictures to go along with something of this nature. So I did my best, and I hope this kind of goes along with what I'm saying. It might go off, but if it does, just have fun with it, because I'm going to. The uncomfortable truth about drugs, supplements, and liberty. It's kind of a broad topic. If you watch the film Bigger, Stronger, Faster that I did with Chris Bell, Rick Collins and I worked on that film for 3 years as consultants, and I think there's 4 or 5 terabytes of film that didn't get used. So you can see it's a huge topic, and I kind of wanted to couch it, since everybody here is more interested in supplements than steroids. I kind of wanted to couch it more towards what it means to you in terms of the supplement industry and the liberties that we sort of take for granted and enjoy, and have seen lost in the supplement industry. But I'm going to use steroids as a kind of basis by which to illustrate how the government works. And then we'll kind of make the correlation after I give you that little bit of how the government railroaded steroids into Schedule 3 of the DEA's list of banned substances. So a little bit about me. As you know from the introduction, I spent a long time, 25 years or so in this industry, writing and talking about the use of performance-enhancing drugs and how it affects our liberties vis-a-vis the law. And it kind of perturbs me at some points in time when I realize how much of what we take for granted in terms of what we're allowed to do every day, what we think it's okay to do just because it's us and our bodies, that from taking supplements to taking drugs. Not taking drugs to get high or get addicted to them and knock over liquor stores because you got to have your next fix, but for guys, especially older guys, who just want to look good and look young and stay healthy, there's a certain amount of use for a certain amount of illegal drugs, but they shouldn't really be illegal, should they? So I started off as a fat kid. That's not me, but it kind of illustrates pretty well what I was like when I was a kid and what I was eating to get that way. When I was about 12 years old, I saw this guy, also not me. That's Sergio Oliva, to a fat kid at 12 years old, looking at his traps rising up to the point where they almost obliterated his ears. On, I think it was ABC Wide World of Sports was televising the 1972 Mr. Olympia. That hooked it for me right there. I couldn't believe it. That's what I wanted. I had to figure out how to get muscles like that. And I learned about Arnold, who became one of my heroes, and especially Lou Ferrigno, who became one of my all-time favorites. And there was, back in 1972, in upstate New York, there were not a lot of gyms. And that's pretty much, looks a lot like the one I had to work with. And it was pretty primitive. But eventually, I realized there's no supplement industry, there's no personal trainers, there's no ISSN, there's nothing. We were virtually all alone. And you had to figure out what to do by virtue of going to the gym and hanging out with guys at a place like that and going at it on your own. And I actually moved to California to be a bodybuilder, and I ended up in Gold's Gym, and I ended up training in the same gym as these guys right here, Arnold and Frank Zane and Dave Draper and a lot of my other idols. And it became an incredible experience, and I really got hooked on it. And I learned before long that there had to do a lot of hard work, and I moved eventually to the new Gold's Gym, where I found out about these. In fact, back then, they were not only not illegal, but I even saw reps from Argonon and Cyril and other drug companies would pull up to the back of Gold's Gym and distribute the orders that guys put in, right to the drug company. It was normal. It was okay. There's nobody saw any bad in that. It was just kind of just the way things were. And if you didn't have the drug rep, you drove down to San Diego, took the trolley to Tijuana, and you bought your stuff in the pharmacies there, and they were pretty much a lot cheaper. Some questionable sources, and you had to use animal steroids, but pretty much it was okay. It was no big deal. But steroids were not the answer. And a lot of people think today that it's all about the drugs, and clearly it's not. So everything was going along just fine. Everybody was training and doing their drugs on the down low. Nobody had any. It wasn't a big deal. Nobody really cared about bodybuilders or what they were doing. Other athletes were doing what they had to do. And then this happened. Now, had that been Carl Lewis, we know that we know Wade Exum would have swept the test results under the rug, and we wouldn't have had what came in the aftermath of Ben Johnson setting that world record of 9.79 in the 100-yard dash. And because of that, steroids had a face. And then this guy, Dan Lundgren, and this guy, Joe Biden, who's now oddly our vice president, drafted a bill that was initially started out in 1987. The bill was introduced to make it a felony to distribute steroids without a prescription. But since the bill and the laws impose no federal controls on the manufacture and prescription of anabolics, they didn't prevent steroids products from being diverted to the black market. And for this reason, and a few doctors began suggesting controlled substance status for anabolic steroids, and for some reason it got the attention of Congress. The process by which any drug is to be scheduled by the DEA has to satisfy these guidelines. And I'll just go over them real quick. And you try to think of testosterone in the back of your mind when you're thinking about its actual or relative potential for abuse. It's scientific evidence of its pharmacological effect, if known. The state of current scientific knowledge regarding the drug or the substance. Its history and current pattern of abuse. The scope, duration, and significance of abuse. What, if any, risk there is to the public health. Its psychic or psychological dependence liability, and whether the substance is an immediate precursor of a substance already controlled under this subchapter. And the answer, pretty much across the board with respect to steroids, is no. It doesn't satisfy any of those. The subsequent hearings that ensued on Capitol Hill were hotly debated and attended by very prestigious members of the scientific community and sports community. And the disposition of several of those agencies in attendance, one being the Department of Health and Human Services, concluded at the end of the hearings that no scheduling is warranted. The AMA's position was the AMA opposed scheduling because abuse of steroids does not relate to the physical or psychological dependence as is required for scheduling, which we read on that former slide. The DEA's position was the Controlled Substance Act is built entirely and exclusively around drugs which are principally psychoactive and are abused almost exclusively by virtue and because of that property. All of these drugs can be described either as narcotics, stimulants, depressants, or hallucinogens. The DEA is not the appropriate body to enforce any measures of this kind. Chuck Usalis gave a, I would say, objective overview, neither for nor against, but in good conscience. He said, increased death, probability of death or morbidity could be taking place, but people apparently are not dropping like flies. And I think we have to be careful not to lose further credibility. Then, sorry, is it me? I'm trying to stand still.
No, I think it's the laptop on the bike. I think it's the,
Yeah, this thing? Thank you.
Thank you.
Not driving anybody else nuts but me. Hurry up with this guy. That's what I was going to go to college. You figure that stuff out. Then it was Congress's turn to mount their argument. And instead of putting scientists on, they put members of the sports community. And they were going to call witnesses whose stories would help support the criminalization idea. Former Olympic track and field athlete Diane Williams testified about the masculinization she suffered due to steroid abuse. She talked about all kinds of her side effects and all kinds of things that made it uncomfortable for her as a woman, but the fact that she won several medals was kind of left out of the whole equation. So next was Steve Curson. You know, he later died. I think a tree fell on him. I don't think he died of steroids. But he was a former player of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He offered articulate testimony by suggesting, without any basis of fact, that his heart problems were linked to his past steroid use. Pat Crosset, conditioning coach for the Philadelphia 76ers and Philadelphia Flyers, insisted that steroids must be considered a controlled substance no different than cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. It was Kenneth Cashin, the assistant professor of psychiatry at Yale University School of Medicine, who spoke the language that Congress was looking to hear. He opined that steroid use can cause an addiction with similarities to alcohol, opiate, and cocaine addiction. He talked about the dangerous criminal-like behavior while intoxicated on steroids. Now, I don't know about you, but I've done an awful lot of testosterone in my past, and I have never once been intoxicated on it. I would like to have been, considering the amount I did, but no, I've never been intoxicated on testosterone, unless you can be called, you know, strong and horny intoxicated, but no. And he says that individuals have lost control of their behavior. Guaranteed I never did that. Nor do I know anybody who ever has. And, you know, the instance of roid rage comes up, and, you know, Rick Collins and I have talked a lot about roid rage. And, you know, there's just no data. There's no such thing as roid rage. And in fact, there was a study published about 5 or 6 years ago that showed the exact opposite, that testosterone levels increased after a bout of aggression, not that elevated testosterone increased aggression. So I think one of the study models was people watching a football game, and they had their, you know, they monitored their test levels before the football game and then while their team was winning or losing, and their test levels were up post-aggressive bout. So there was just no validity to that whatsoever. But when all was said and done, despite the position of the DEA, the AMA, the recommendations of the most knowledgeable experts, Congress scheduled steroids as Schedule 3 of the DEA's list of controlled substances under Title 21 of the United States Code, which regulates food and drugs. The legislation was called the Anabolic Steroids Control Act of 1990. And that is what we have today, even though it was augmented in 2004. Now, what motivated Congress to ignore the advice of the experts and forge ahead with scheduling? Page after page after page of condensed